Welcome to the Boomer Briefing Podcast, where we help you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. I'm your host, Jon Hubbard, shareholder and consultant here at Boomer Consulting. And with me today is Katelynn Kolterman. Katelynn, thank you for being on the podcast today.
Thank you, Jon. Glad to be here.
All right. So the topic we are talking about today is the importance of building relationships at work. And for our listeners, this topic isn't necessarily a new topic, right? We all know how important relationships are in the workplace, or at least that's what we've been hearing about probably for most of our careers. But I think you would agree, Katelynn, that there is a renewed focus on this topic given the last couple years. So I'll start with, why is it important for firms to really think about how they can help build relationships in the workplace?
Yeah, definitely. So just like you said, I think we're kind of realizing how important relationships in the workplace are, and just in any aspect of your life, really, relationships are incredibly important. But specifically in the workplace, I think relationships really help to build that connection between you and your coworkers, which can help to improve your mental health because, being in that personal and trusted relationship with a coworker really allows you to let your guard down and be yourself and not have to be on all the time, which is really nice because we know that being on all the time can be incredibly emotionally draining. So being able to be in an environment where you're comfortable with your coworkers, where you feel trusted, this can also really help to facilitate collaboration between coworkers. So as you kind of get to know each other and work more closely together, you kind of start to learn how your coworkers do things differently and the way that they think about things differently. So I think that's something that's really important to note, is that we don't all think the same way. So something that we do at BCI is we have what is called the Kolbe index that we have all of our employees take. And I think this is a really valuable tool just to see visually how we think differently and how our coworkers think differently. I think in turn that really helps to improve communication between coworkers because you learn how your coworkers communicate. You learn how they would prefer to be communicated to as well. So I think that really helps to facilitate that communication between coworkers and stop things from falling in the cracks. So those things kind of work together to create increased productivity as well. So along with collaboration, mental health, communication, people want to be able to come to work and they want to feel comfortable and they want to be around people that they really trust. So I think being in that environment really helps increase that motivation, being able to joke around your coworkers, not having to feel uncomfortable in the environment that you're in every day can really help to increase that productivity from day to day. And I think lastly, when people feel trusted and respected at work and they feel comfortable, they're able to share their ideas a lot more comfortably, a lot more openly. And I think that really kind of helps to facilitate the flow of ideas and brainstorming and to allow those innovative ideas to kind of bubble up to the top that might not otherwise if people didn't feel comfortable around their coworkers and in the relationships that they're in the workplace.
I like how you started the answer with talking about mental health. And I think that's indicative of even just where we are as a society, as a profession, that topic is being talked about more than ever before. And sometimes we may not tie relationships at work with the topic of mental health, but I think you make a good point that those two things are definitely connected and related. And when you think about happiness in the workplace, right, just in general, happiness in the workplace, I know one common attribute is if you feel like you have strong relationships at work. And so even tying, Katelynn, to some of our previous podcast episodes around attraction and retention of employees, right? This is a huge thing. The more relationships you have at work, the more high quality relationships, the more relationships, to use your word, that are high trust, then the greater stickiness there is too for those individuals. But I love how you started with mental health. I think if we would ask this question, just a few years ago, most people's answers would have started with productivity or efficiency or something business related. Yet you're highlighting the importance of that from a mental health perspective. So lots of good points there, Caitlin, on that. Um, as you think about the steps firms can take to maybe improve how relationships are built in the workplace, what would be your advice to our listeners there?
Yeah, definitely. So while it would be really, really nice for those relationships to build completely organically, I think that's not always the case, especially, we get really busy and caught up with our daily tasks and, the work that we need to get done from day to day. And especially if you're working in a remote company, that just makes it all the more difficult to be able to connect with your coworkers when you're kind of sitting at your computer at home and kind of feeling like you're out here on an island by yourself. So that's why I think it's really important to build in specific time for relationship building and have some kind of team building exercises ready to get to know each other. So at BCI, we've recently started doing what we call the collab lab, which is kind of like a study hall where we get together virtually every other Friday for about 2 hours in a virtual world called Verbella. So it's really, really cool because we all have our little avatars and we can customize them to kind of look like ourselves. And we have our little Boomer Consulting virtual building that we can all hang out in and hang around the conference room table together. So I think this is a really interesting way to kind of get everyone in the company together, at least bi-weekly, to meet virtually and be able to work, kind of in the same space together. And it's really, really interesting because in Verbella, you can actually talk to each other with your actual voices using the microphone. You can share your screen. And so it's been a really cool tool for collaboration as we kind of work together. If you come up with a question for somebody, you can kind of just pull them aside into another room where no one can hear you and discuss that question with each other. So that's been a very interesting tool for us for collaboration and also for relationship building because, as a remote company, it does get a little lonely sometimes kind of working at home by yourself. So that's an interesting way to kind of try to get everyone together at least bi-weekly in a virtual setting. I think while that's kind of a study hall and that's work related, I think it's also important to schedule time with each other that's specifically for team building without having to think about work, without having to worry about, what's going on in the company. So another thing that we do here is we hold virtual happy hours every quarter, and we kind of try to plan activities for this time so we're not just sitting around staring at each other's virtual squares and not sure what to talk about. So we kind of plan these activities with team building exercises. We might play Jeopardy or Two Truths and a Lie or do a virtual scavenger hunt or something like that. So I know a lot of people in our company really look forward to those virtual happy hours and having that point of connection between everyone in the company scheduled. I think beyond that, to kind of facilitate that relationship building in the workplace, you really want to make it a part of your company culture. So specifically at BCI, we have our break room buddies where every quarter we get paired with a different coworker in the company, and we just get together bi-weekly, 25 minutes. We get together and chat, not about work. We talk about, personal stuff and getting to know each other and just have that time scheduled, that touch point to connect with each other. And with that, for our new hires, we always match them with a mentor that they can also meet with bi-weekly for 25 minutes to connect, to ask questions, to see how your capacity is, to see if you're doing okay. So this provides an opportunity for less experienced people to have someone within the company, if they don't really know anyone very well yet, at least they have that person in the company that they can go to ask questions or turn to for resources. And I think both people really kind of benefit from that relationship, from growing the relationship with each other and gaining a confidant within the company. And I think going along with company culture, you really want to facilitate a culture of connection, a culture of encouraging employees to be able to be open and honest and give that honest feedback. So we know genuine relationships are built on trust and respect, but building that respect and that trust takes time. So we want to build a culture that encourages honest feedback. So I know at Boomer Consulting, it's really been emphasized that feedback is a gift and it's something to encourage, and we encourage our team members to provide it. And when they do provide that feedback, we make sure, our feelings aren't hurt. That's constructive criticism, that's a gift, and we recognize it as an opportunity to improve. I think the last thing I wanted to mention is how at Boomer Consulting, we do what's called team days. So we have our team days to get together twice a year, once virtually and one in person. And during these times, we have the day to work together on different initiatives that we have going on in the company, and we work and collaborate throughout the day. But then once the work day is over and once we're done talking shop, we always get together, and if we're virtual, we do another one of those happy hours. But if we're on site, we get to go out and get drinks together and do something fun together, do an event or an activity. I know we've done axe throwing before. That was really fun, really interesting. And I know we've done kind of a game show competition with each other, where that was a really good, team building exercise. So trying to find fun ways for the team to connect, and in person, if at all possible, is just a wonderful way to really facilitate that relationship building within your firm.
Those are all great ideas, Katelynn. Your very first one I thought was, they were all good. Your first one was intriguing just because when you think about, and I kind of jotted down new ways of collaborating or new ways of working with one another. So, there's ways in which we work together that may be more traditional. And then we have things like happy hours or just things for pure fun. But what you're proposing there is almost a hybrid of both, where, hey, there's some new innovative tools we can use to work with one another, like Verbella you were mentioning. And there's some fun into it. There is some newness related to that type of tool, and being able to be productive in that type of environment, I think, is a great way to build relationships. You, of course, mentioned the feedback piece, which we all know, when giving and receiving feedback there, that can really help strengthen and grow a relationship between two people when done in the correct way. So I like that one as well. And then, the team days. It's one thing to be able to work together just to accomplish a task or just to get things done. It's another thing to kind of what you're talking about with those team days, to be able to spend some time together, focus on strategy, high level thinking. What do we want for our organization? What do we want for our teams? What do we want to be true about our culture? Some of those bigger picture topics, and then go have drinks with one another and, axe throwing or, things of that sort is just a really great way to build those relationships as well. Talk a little bit about the type of results, firms that you've seen, or maybe even within our organization that, what are some of the benefits firms have experienced or organizations have experienced just by having stronger relationships?
Right. So I think it kind of goes back to, that increased mental health, that increased collaboration, communication, productivity, innovation, all of those things are really results that come out of implementing and working on building those relationships within the workplace. I think beyond that, just being able to come to a workplace where you feel comfortable can make your job a lot less stressful. This can decrease absenteeism, increase your motivation. People are a lot more motivated because they actually want to come to work because, that's where their friends are, and that's where they feel motivated and where they feel included and accepted and comfortable and trusted, and all of these wonderful things that come out of those good relationships that we're trying to build. And I think along with that, another result that really happens within firms is decreased turnover. People don't want to quit their jobs just because they're so integrated into their role and they feel so accepted in this community. And again, the workplace, that's where their friends are, and that's where they feel accepted, and that's where they feel at home.
That's awesome. And that's so true. And, we work a lot with HR directors, CHROs of larger firms, and they would second what you're saying as well, where the importance of those relationships at work are really, in a lot of ways, some of the most critical factors when people decide whether to stay or to leave. So, as we finish out this episode, Katelynn, I want to leave you with one more question, and that is, what's the next step someone should take to, let's say we're talking to, or let's say a partner's listening to this podcast. What would your recommendation be to them about maybe how to improve the building of relationships in their firm?
Yeah, so I've already kind of thrown out a couple of ideas that we do specifically here at BCI. I think those are all wonderful ways and wonderful things that you could implement into your firm to try to get that relationship building going within your company. But I think really the first step that someone could take is kind of getting some feedback from your team on what kind of team building activities they'd like to see implemented and what would work for them and what they're interested in. And I think, it kind of depends on the company because, of course, every company dynamic is different, every company size is different. So I think to some extent, it's a little bit of trial and error to kind of try to figure out what works specifically for your company. So one day a team building activity might go great, and then the next day it might seem a little bit forced. So kind of trying to figure out what works for you, and always soliciting that feedback from your team and seeing what has worked and what people think about what you're implementing and if they have any suggestions. And then, of course, asking if there's anyone on your team who is already interested in brainstorming and setting up and implementing those team building activities. Maybe that's someone's unique ability that they could kind of explore, and seeing if there's someone on your team that might be able to explore and to help to facilitate those activities and that feedback. I think that's really the next step to try to get those team building activities implemented.
I think that's great. This is not something you build in a silo, right? This is something you are reaching out to those on your team, soliciting feedback, getting thoughts from them. So I think that is excellent advice. Well, we are finishing up our episode now. We're reaching close to that 20-minute mark, but Katelynn, I do know you are on Instagram, you are on LinkedIn. So if someone needs to get in contact with you, they can certainly reach out through those methods as well. And of course, your profile page and contact information is on boomer.com as well. For our listeners, if you enjoyed the conversation Katelynn and I just had, we release new episodes every Tuesday morning. This week, was about building of relationships. Next week might be about growth or technology or processes. We always mix up the topics, but one common theme among all those topics is that they are critical to your firm's success. So please subscribe. Thanks for listening, and thanks, Katelynn.
Yeah, thanks for having me.